Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, two great Nevada journalists, Redmond, host of Mobbed Up, and Frank Mullen, editor of the Reno News and Review online, for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Hello, is this D&D Roofing?
Yes, it is. How may I help you?
You did such a great job on my roof. May I speak to the owner?
I am an owner.
Oh, can I speak to your supervisor?
Sure.
How may I help you?
I love your work. May I speak to the owner?
I am an owner. We're all owners. Well, that's why at D&D we work so hard to keep your home safe and sound.
Oh, no wonder.
D&D Roofing and Sheet Metal. Local, employee-owned, here for you.
Retail's impact on Nevada's economy? Enormous. 8,600 businesses, large and small, employing 145,000 workers. And last fiscal year, retail paid tax on nearly $60 billion in sales. We're the Retail Association of Nevada. We support retail, we help it grow, and we mean business.
RANNV.org.
Take a look at Pro Group Management and see how your workers' comp requirements can be met head-on. By taking a proactive approach, Pro Group can assure that your company is meeting or exceeding state and federal standards. As you move forward in your industry, Pro Group moves with you, simplifying regulatory tasks, clearing the way so you can get the job done and look to your future success. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Early in the morning or throughout the night, professional truck drivers are on the job, serving you, safely moving freight that's crucial to our economy. From the oldest industries to our newest innovators, from the exotic to the everyday, trucks are everywhere, moving everything. Never afraid to embrace a future that makes Nevada and our nation stronger. Trucking moves America forward.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're absolutely delighted to welcome to the program Redmond. He is the producer, writer, and host of Mobbed Up, The Fight for Las Vegas, an 11-part true crime podcast series produced by the Las Vegas Review-Journal in partnership with the Mob Museum. Great to have you on the program, sir.
Great to be on. Thanks, Sam.
So let's start out with where did the idea first come for the podcast?
Yeah, so I joined the Las Vegas Review-Journal almost exactly a year ago, last summer, July 1st. And I remember when I flew here for my interview, they had me staying downtown right next to the Mob Museum. And so it was actually something that I started talking about with the Las Vegas Review-Journal in my interview, where I was looking at what was out there in terms of podcasts, and nobody done a podcast about the mob in Las Vegas. So when I started, that was kind of my first big pitch to them was let's do this. Let's, talk to the Mob Museum, see if they'd be willing to get involved and see if we can make this happen.
And what was your interest in the mob prior to coming to Las Vegas?
So I'd worked a little bit I'd worked on another true crime podcast, and I'd listened to a lot of different crime podcasts. And so it was just something that moving to Las Vegas, there's kind of this, storied history of the mob here. And so I was interested in finding, kind of what stories might be compelling to tell through audio in Las Vegas. And so when I did move here, it was kind of just seeing the Mob Museum and being in Las Vegas made me want to try to find a way to tell that story.
Why do you think that we have such a fascination with the mob? Going way, way back. I mean, obviously The Godfather would be one of the biggest, but I mean, so many other great movies, so many other great books. And it's not like this is something from 40 years ago. This is something that constantly continues.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that myself. And for me, I think the fascination is that mob culture is just so different from the world that most of us live in. And it's something that is hard to access, I think, for that reason, because, these guys really lived, and, the branches of the mob that are still around, they really live in their own world. And so to be able to kind of speak to some people who are on the fringes of that world, I think is fascinating to most people, because you get to learn about this strange subculture.
And the irony is that so many people talk about the mob days when they ran Las Vegas as the good old days versus the corporate today. And yet the people who are running those casinos, they may have given better comps, cheaper buffet prices, and cheaper rooms, but they were not nice people.
Yeah, it's these guys kind of fill a weird role where they're sort of a hybrid of, on the one hand, they were these violent criminals, and I think people detest them for that. But on the other hand, people sort of look at them like celebrities. And so one of the things that I tried to make clear in this series is kind of the reality of what the mob was doing in Las Vegas. They weren't just, driving around in nice cars looking cool all the time. They were committing real crimes, and those crimes had a real impact on Nevadans and Las Vegans.
One of the things that jumps out at a person immediately that you subscribe to the podcast, and once again, it's Mobbed Up, The Fight for Las Vegas. You can get it anywhere where you can download podcasts, is that it has warnings at the beginning. And it's not just the typical sex, violence, or bad language. You actually refer to murder as one of the things that's going to be discussed in the show. That's pretty rare.
Yeah. I didn't want to surprise anyone with that, but at the same time, like I said, my goal wasn't to sort of glorify this subculture or this history. And, there was real violence that occurred, and there were victims of that violence. And, we weren't trying to fluff around that or anything like that.
And that's kind of in tandem with what the mission became of the Mob Museum. It wasn't to glorify the mob days, it was to be more historically factual, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Mob Museum does a really good job of, and I don't speak for them, but having been there and worked with them, they kind of balance, the mob history with the history of law enforcement in the United States, and they try to make it a very educational experience at the same time as an entertaining experience in the museum.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that the first leader of the Mob Museum was the former FBI director in Las Vegas.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got to work with Jeff Schumacher, who is a former employee of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, now works for the Mob Museum, and other historians. What was the thing in your research? Because obviously you did a ton of research. What was the thing that most surprised you?
I guess being new to Las Vegas myself, I wasn't obviously around back when the mob was here. And I think it was just surprising how ubiquitous the mob was in Las Vegas. I'm trying to remember exactly who I was speaking to when I realized this, but I didn't know where all these things had necessarily happened. And so Lefty Rosenthal's car was famously bombed. It's in the movie Casino in the opening scene. And it turns out that was like a block away from the grocery store that I go to every week. And so just kind of these realizations of how recent this history was and how ubiquitous it was, I think was revelatory.
Did it surprise you of the fact that Las Vegas was an open city where different mob groups from around the country all operated in Las Vegas?
Yeah, it did. I think just from, sort of observing mob history from a distance and watching some movies and things like that, I assumed that it would be very territorial here, being someone who, I'm not a mob historian myself. And so when I started digging into this, it was crazy to me that these guys weren't fighting over territory in Las Vegas. They were working together, sometimes within the same casino project, where they would actually split the skim money that was coming out of a given casino. And so it was kind of this concerted effort from, there had to be a dozen different mob families in the history of Las Vegas that did their best not to kind of tear each other down.
One of the people that, and it's not been released yet, but obviously you've already done the episode, is the episode on Cleanface. And that was, of course, Harry Reid's nickname. Can you share with us a little about what you found out about Senator Reid, and did he participate in this interview?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that'll be episode 6 of the series. And he's actually at the center of that episode. I sat down with him for about an hour or so in the fall of 2019. And he was the chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission at, I don't know the exact years, I think it was around 77 to 81. So kind of right when state gaming regulators were really starting to get a grip on what was going on and try to fight against it. And so he showed up on some FBI wiretaps. They were discussing a guy named Cleanface, or Mr. Clean, who was supposedly providing information to the mob. And it turned out that Cleanface was referencing Senator Reid. And at the end of a long investigation, he was actually cleared of any wrongdoing because they determined at least that these guys were just sort of talking. They were trying to make themselves seem more important by saying, oh, I have access to this official, that official. But it created a real stir for him and his career. And there are all these other crazy stories that he shares on the episode. The one I'll tease is that he was actually involved in a sting operation. When someone tried to bribe him, he went to the FBI and they set up a sting operation. And so there are all these wild stories about his time on the Nevada Gaming Commission.
Frank Collada is featured heavily in the first couple of episodes. The way he talks about murder is just like an everyday deal. It's no big deal. And he came up with Tony Spilatro, who eventually became his boss. Was it a little scary talking to him?
Yeah, frankly, it was off-putting, that's for sure. When I went to interview him and when I met him for the first time, I'd done background research on him, so I wasn't surprised by what he'd done, but I was a little surprised by the way that he talks about it. He talks about committing murder like you and I would talk about taking out the trash, and that's, I think, kind of probably the result of, he's told these stories before, and so he just kind of has this in his mind as a story he tells. But yeah, it was wild.
Well, I got to say, I'm loving the series. I'm a big fan of mob stories and mob movies, not particularly a fan of what the mob actually really did, but the way you tell it and the quality of the podcast is extraordinary. It's called Mobbed Up, The Fight for Las Vegas. You can download it anywhere you get podcasts, and I can't wait to hear the whole series. Thanks so much for being here, Reid. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Sam.
All right, and we'll be right back.
Safety. We all think about it. You think about it when he buckles in, when you check your mirrors and put away your phone. RTC thinks about safety too. In fact, we create it. Center turn lanes mean fewer blind spots. Bike lanes keep cyclists and you safe. Roundabouts reduce injury collisions, and all these crosswalks are designed to keep families like yours safe. Safety is your priority, and it's ours too. Every day, in everything we do.
Ahern Rentals began as Signal Gas Station on Las Vegas Boulevard. Founder John Ahern grew the business by offering rentals. His son Don built on John's legacy, growing Ahern Rentals into the largest independently owned American rental company, with 89 locations in 30 states. Don also brought his experience and vision to equipment manufacturing with Extreme Manufacturing and Snorkel. Today, Ahern Rentals continues to bring its family values to a new generation. Learn more at ahern.com.
Hi, I'm Eric Robnett, owner of Home Energy Experts. Has this ever happened to you?
Honey, did you remember to turn down the thermostat?
Forgetting to set the temperature? Not fun. We can help. Our new smart thermostat keeps the temperature set for your comfort all by itself.
I'm feeling hot now.
To increase your comfort, go to homeenergyexperts.com for details. That's homeenergyexperts.com.
The signs and symptoms of cataracts can start out small with subtle changes in your vision. So don't wait. Be proactive and take your vision into your own hands. If you're experiencing the onset of cataracts or just have questions, contact your eye care professional or call Eye Care Associates of Nevada today. Dr. Hiss has years of experience specializing in the surgical correction of eye disorders and has completed over 84,000 vision correcting procedures. At Eye Care Associates of Nevada, we'll change the way you look at the world.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're delighted to welcome back to the program Frank Mullen. He is a longtime investigative journalist for the Reno Gazette-Journal, retired and now is back as editor of the Reno News and Review online. So let's, first of all, for folks across the state who may not know this, Reno News and Review have been around a long, long time, but with COVID crisis, advertising revenues plummeted, as they have done for so many newspapers, and it forced the paper out of print. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it seemed, suddenly you pop back up reporting. What's the story?
Well, in mid-March, of course, when the non-essential businesses closed down, News and Review lost not only its advertisers overnight, but also its distribution points. As a free newspaper, you had to have access to people, and people weren't on the streets, they weren't in the stores, the restaurants, venues anymore. And alternative weeklies generally have a very slim reserve, any alternative weekly, and so they went dark and were dark for several weeks, and then brought back online by one of their assistant editors, who I did some freelance for a few weeks. And the people that own, it's privately owned, News and Review, and also the same owners own Chico and Sacramento News and Reviews. And they got a PPP loan, a short-term PPP loan, and that enabled them to continue the operation here in Reno. And the assistant editor moved on to another job, and they offered me the editorship, at least for temporarily, to get it going again. And so unexpectedly, I got back into local journalism.
Okay, so RenoNewsandReview.com?
It's one of those HTTP
right.
/ Reno.newsreview.com. So it's not one of the wwws.
Okay, but basically you can type in Reno.newsreview.com. And
basically, yeah, and if you type that in Google, that's the first thing that'll come up, is the new site. It's not the old website that had been around for a while. It's switched addresses.
What do you think of the state of journalism today? Because, I'm somebody who's been a newspaper fan my whole life, but in particular, the last 40 plus years, New York Times, all the state's local papers, and, broadcast news, obviously. And it seems to me that when I first started getting into really reading newspapers, it was pretty hard for me to figure out what the editorial position was unless I actually read the editorial pages. Mm-hmm. Now it seems that the editorial, the opinion, has made its way into so many news stories. I realize that the main job of a newspaper is to sell papers, because if you don't sell papers, you're not going to stay in business. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, a question that's asked of me so often is, who can I read that gives me unbiased news? You're somebody that I've known for a long time that does write unbiased news. I have no idea what your political affiliation is, and that's great. And I don't care what your political affiliation is. I just want the news straight. I want to be able to make up my own mind. So what do you think of where we are?
Well, I think it depends on what paper you're talking about. There's, particularly with broadcasts, there's so much partisanship in national broadcasting and in local broadcasting as well, with all the chains and corporations that own nationwide outlets. In terms of local news, when I worked at the Gazette-Journal, we were cursed for being way too liberal or way too conservative.
Right.
And which is, I think, where you need to be.
And we have the same problem here.
Yeah. And so I can only speak for what I've seen locally. And I know that there are ridiculously partisan papers on both sides, but in terms of what I see in town now, I don't think you could say that about the RTJ today. I think that a lot of people take it as more liberal today, simply because they push back against, for example, the administration. Pence yesterday saying that the cases have gone down in all these states, particularly Oklahoma. The data shows the opposite. So when they point that out, people say, oh, they're obviously against the administration, but facts are facts, so I think there's a lot of that going on as well. If there are people who believe their opinion is as valid as facts, so on either side of the aisle, they're not going to take something that they disagree with as gospel. They're going to say, oh, it's your partisanship. But
all right, and we'll be right back.
Dimitri Prine here for Design Outdoor. At Design Outdoor, we specialize in all hardscapes, pavers, and walls you'll need for everything, from wonderful small yards to full-blown outdoor living. And we only refer the best contractors to make your vision a reality. Our store and backyard are located at 11600 South Virginia, just north of DeMonte Ranch Parkway. Visit designoutdoor.com or call us at 851-9499.
I'm men's rights attorney Marilyn York, and because I represent men in all family law matters, women often call me gender traitor, woman hater, and even disgusting. So why represent men and target myself with these offensive monikers? It's simple. Children with fathers in their lives are 6 times less likely to drop out of school, 15 times less likely to go to prison, and 5 times less likely to commit suicide. So ladies, you can hate me, but please love your children more than you hate their fathers.
Hi, I'm Dave Newman. Remember me? I used to be the house detective, and now I'm a realtor, full-time at RE/MAX Realty Affiliates. A lot of people ask me, how's the market? You know what? It's fantastic. If you're even kicking around the idea of buying or selling, give me a call. Let's talk about it. Call me at RE/MAX Realty Affiliates and just ask for the guy who used to be the house detective, Dave Newman.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
I'm back on Nevada Newsmakers. Frank Mullen now is back as editor of the Reno News and Review online. So what do you say to people who ask you, and I'm sure they ask you the same question, what do I watch, what do I read to be able to get a balanced, objective opinion?
I think a variety of sources. You can't depend on MSNBC all day long, or Fox or CNN. You've got to spread out. And looking at, especially with the internet, the first thing I do when I see something on the internet is I look at the source. You know, if it's some website I never heard of, I'm probably not going to open it up. And if it's some national story, there's going to be a lot of sources for that story. So instead of just reading the New York Times and that's it, I like to see, well, what is other people saying, particularly in the case of, like, say, BBC or something like that, some foreign source looking in, because they tend to be just observers. You know, and so I think in a national story, you get a balanced look with cherry picking some local or some domestic sources and looking at how do they see this at Reuters or whatever. You know, getting that, it takes some work. But I think a lot of people just take that shortcut is that I got one news source, I believe everything they say. Next, you know, next problem, I got the news problem solved. And I think that's it's a consumer problem as well.
Do you get concerned that politics in this country has become a two-team sport? That you're either on the A team or the B team. You pick which side you want to call A and B, and nobody crosses the line?
Oh yeah, it's. I think everybody sees that now in terms of bipartisanship being a dream. Who grew up with a Senate and a House that could work together. They could say nasty things about each other when it came down to it. They could craft bills, and I think especially now with a national crisis, the partisanship needed to be thrown aside, and it definitely was not. It was COVID was wielded as a weapon, and everybody suffers for that. And I don't know what the solution is. I mean, it's so ingrained now and so black and white now that it's going to be hard to get back to the point where people can listen to each other again and cross lines again without being so hardened into their positions.
Do you think it's possible for anybody in the general public to wrap their head around what $1 trillion being put into the economy means? And now we're talking multi-trillions of dollars?
No, but and the consequences of that kind of debt, especially when for years we've been hearing how horrible the debt burden is and what it's going to do to our next generations and so forth, and all of a sudden this crisis and boom.
Apparently it doesn't matter. That's what we're
Apparently
told
it
is
doesn't matter, yeah.
low interest rates, 30 years to pay it off, it's not a problem. Okay, we've got about 45 seconds,
okay.
And I want to ask you, so what is your mission now as the editor of the Reno News and Review for that publication?
What I'd like to do while I'm there is keep the lights on, keep the stories coming, and I think there's a need for an alternative weekly in Reno. It's been around 30 years. I'd like to see it continue and like to see it get back into print, and I want to do everything I can to make that happen.
And from the reading I've done so far of your stories, it's back to being Frank Mullen as usual, which is always terrific, and we appreciate that. Thank you and the best of luck. These are tough times for the newspaper business.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, and we'll be right back. A bird's eye captures its surroundings at different heights. At Brian Culpa Photography, we can make your imagination soar over buildings, parks, cityscapes, and beyond. Brian's images tell the story and get the job done. If you need a new perspective to tell your story, contact Brian today. Brian Culpa Photography. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com.
Hi, my name's Marilyn Miner, and I'm sure you'd agree that Nevada's a very special place to live. I was born here, and my husband and I have raised our family here. I feel it's a privilege to live and work in the Truckee Meadows. I especially enjoy helping my clients reach their real estate goals. Sometimes the smallest details provide the greatest satisfaction. I'd be complimented to talk to you about your next move.
Call Marilyn Miner at Dixon Realty, 742-1280, or log on to marilynminer.com.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's Development Company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's Development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Pro Group Management specializes in providing industries with the necessary components to satisfy and exceed workers' comp requirements. Every business has unique needs and specific regulations. Pro Group Management stays ahead of the curve, providing up-to-date services to keep your industry in top form. Discover how we simplify your tasks, improve efficiency, and reduce expense to keep you moving in a positive direction. Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
You can now watch Nevada Newsmakers on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for Nevada Newsmakers and become a subscriber. We'll see you on the next broadcast. Thanks for watching and listening.